I am Marissa, 28, and I still cannot believe my parents chose to skip my wedding for my sister Jessica's lunch. It was the final confirmation of what I had suspected my entire life. She has always been the golden child receiving their unconditional love and support, while I fought for mere scraps of attention. The pain of watching the empty seats where my parents should have sat still feels raw months later. Let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. I promise to show you how I finally found my voice and stood up to this toxic family pattern. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always felt like an outsider in my own family. My father Richard worked as an accountant, often bringing work home and secluding himself in his office. My mother Diana taught elementary school, bringing the same strict discipline and high expectations home with her. And then there was Jessica, my sister, 2 years younger, but somehow always the center of our family universe. The earliest memory I have of realizing something was off was my 7th birthday. Mom had promised a small party with a homemade cake and a few friends, the day before Jessica came down with a mild cold. Nothing serious, just sniffles. My party was immediately canceled so Mom could focus on nursing Jessica back to health. I remember sitting alone in my room, surrounded by decorations I had helped put up, wondering what I had done wrong. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I won second place in the district science fair in 4th grade, my parents nodded distractedly. 2 weeks later, when Jessica performed in her dance recital, they brought flowers, took dozens of photos, and took the whole family out for a celebration dinner. Jessica has such natural talent, my mother would say, beaming with pride. She just shines on stage, does she not? When I brought home straight A's, my father would glance at my report card and say, "Good job, keep it up." When Jessica brought home mostly B's with a couple, as there would be elaborate praise and usually a special gift to encourage her progress. Christmas mornings were particularly telling. I would unwrap practical gifts, school supplies, clothes I needed, occasionally a book I had mentioned months before. Jessica would squeal with delight at her new gaming system, trendy clothes, or whatever was the must-have item that year. The family photo wall in our living room told the whole story. Jessica front and center in every arrangement, my parents beaming beside her. I was always positioned slightly off-center, as if I were an afterthought in the composition. Visitors to our home would inevitably comment on how beautiful Jessica was, how talented, how charming. My mother would agree enthusiastically while I stood by invisible. My grandmother Eleanor, my father's mother, was the only one who seemed to notice. During her visits, she would make special time just for me. We would bake together, or she would listen as I talked about books I was reading or science projects I was working on. "You have a beautiful mind, Marissa," she would tell me. "Never let anyone make you feel less than extraordinary." By my teenage years, I had developed my own coping mechanisms. I threw myself into academics, spending hours in the library, where the quiet felt comforting rather than excluding. I joined clubs where I could find my own community outside of my family's shadow. I found solace in books about people overcoming adversity, secretly casting myself as the protagonist who would eventually triumph. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, my parents would finally see me. I operated on the unspoken assumption that I needed to work twice as hard for half the recognition that Jessica received just for existing. My grades were perfect. I took advanced classes. I volunteered. I became captain of the debate team. Each achievement felt like another attempt to wave my arms and say, "Look at me. I am here too." My high school graduation should have been a moment of pride, a celebration of all I had accomplished. As I stood in my cap and gown, my mother fussed with my collar. "Stand up straight, Marissa," she instructed, "and try to smile naturally in the photos." After the ceremony, as families gathered to take pictures and celebrate, my parents spent most of the time talking about Jessica's upcoming college visits, despite the fact that she still had another year of high school. "Jessica is thinking about pre-med," my mother told anyone who would listen while I stood there holding my diploma with honors, having just delivered the salutatorian address. "She has such a natural aptitude for science." I had just been accepted to Northwestern with a partial scholarship, but somehow that news never made it into the conversation. By the end of that day, I had begun to wonder if there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Was I just inherently less lovable? Did I give off some signal that made me less worthy of celebration? These questions would haunt me for years to come. The day I left for Northwestern felt like my first real breath of freedom. The campus in Evanston, Illinois was nearly 1,000 miles from Boston, a distance I had chosen very deliberately. My father helped carry boxes to my dorm room. his rare moment of focused attention on me tinged with what I thought might be sadness. "Your mother wanted to come," he said as we made the last trip from the car. "But Jessica has sorority rush week orientation and needed help with her outfits." I nodded unsurprised. "It is fine, Dad. I understand." And I did understand. This was the pattern of my life, and while it hurt, it was also utterly familiar. That night after my father left for his hotel before flying home the next day, I sat on my newly made bed and felt a strange mixture of loneliness and exhilaration. I could reinvent myself here. Nobody knew me as Jessica's sister. Nobody had years of preconceptions about which daughter was the special one. My roommate Tara arrived late that evening, bursting into the room with multiple suitcases and an energy that immediately filled the space. "Sorry I am late," she said, dropping her bags and extending her hand. "Family drama. My parents are going through a divorce and could not stop fighting long enough to drive me to campus together. So much fun being the rope in their tug of war." Her openness about family problems was shocking to me. In my house, we never discussed unpleasant truths. We maintained the fiction that we were a perfect, happy family, even when evidence to the contrary was staring us in the face. Over late-night ramen and study sessions, Tara and I became close friends. She was the first person I ever told about my family dynamics hesitantly, at first afraid she would think I was overreacting or being dramatic. "That is straight-up toxic," she declared after I recounted the story of my canceled birthday party. "Your parents are playing favorites, and that is messed up." Having someone validate my experience was revolutionary. I had spent so many years questioning my own perceptions, wondering if I was just being oversensitive. Tara saw the truth immediately and gave me permission to trust my own feelings. College became my time to bloom. I joined the marketing club and discovered I had a talent for understanding what motivated people. I made friends who appreciated my dry humor and thoughtfulness. I earned academic honors without feeling like they were merely attempts to win parental approval. For perhaps the first time, I was doing things for myself because they interested me or brought me joy. Phone calls home were less frequent than my parents might have expected. When we did talk, the conversation inevitably turned to Jessica's exploits at home. Her decision to attend Boston University so she could stay close to home. Her popular new boyfriend. Her starring role in a university production, despite only being a freshman. During Thanksgiving break of my sophomore year, I witnessed a scene that crystallized everything about our family dynamic. Jessica threw a tantrum because our parents had bought her a used car instead of the new model she wanted. Instead of addressing her entitled behavior, my parents apologized profusely, promising to see if they could figure out a way to get her what she wanted. Later that night, I overheard my mother on the phone with a relative. "We just want her to be happy," she said. "You know how sensitive Jessica is. She feels things so deeply." I sat on the stairs invisible, wondering who had ever worried about my happiness or sensitivity. As college progressed, the distance between my family and me grew. Not just the physical distance, but an emotional one as well. I called less. I came home for shorter visits. I built a life that did not revolve around seeking their approval or attention. During junior year, I met James in a modern American literature class. Tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, he noticed me in a way I was not used to being noticed. He actually listened when I spoke, asked follow-up questions, remembered details from previous conversations. After years of feeling like background noise, his attention was both terrifying and intoxicating. Our relationship developed slowly. We started as study partners, then friends, and finally admitted there was something more between us. On our first official date, he asked about my family, and I gave my standard vague answers. "They are fine, pretty normal. Dad is an accountant, mom is a teacher. I have a younger sister." A few more dates in, I finally told him the truth about how it felt to grow up as the less favored child. I expected him to minimize it or suggest I was exaggerating. Instead, he got angry on my behalf. "That is not right," he said simply. "You deserved better." Those words broke something open in me. I cried in a way I had not allowed myself to cry before. Not just for that moment, but for all the moments throughout my childhood when I had swallowed my hurt and convinced myself it did not matter. The first time I brought James home to meet my family was during winter break of senior year. I had warned him about the dynamics, but seeing it firsthand was still shocking to him. My parents spent most of the dinner interrogating him about his plans after graduation, his family background, his career aspirations. Just when it seemed they might actually be interested in my life for once, they shifted gears. Jessica is bringing her new boyfriend Thomas for Christmas, my mother announced. He is pre-law at Harvard. His family has a summer home in Martha's Vineyard. When Jessica arrived with Thomas the next day, my parents fawned over him, giving him a house tour, showing him family photos, pulling out bottles of wine they had been saving for a special occasion. James and I exchanged glances as we sat in the living room, largely ignored. That night in the guest room, James held me close. "Now I understand," he whispered. "But Marissa, their inability to see how amazing you are is their loss, not yours." My graduation from Northwestern was another exercise in feeling invisible in plain sight. My parents attended, but spent most of the time taking photos of Jessica with various campus landmarks to show her what awaited her as she prepared to start her master's program. James's parents, who had driven in from Michigan, showed more excitement and pride in my achievement than my own family. After graduation, James and I both found jobs in Chicago and decided to build our life there, far from Boston and the family dynamics that had shaped so much of my past. It felt like a conscious choice to prioritize my own well-being, to surround myself with people who valued me for exactly who I was. The years after college were transformative. I found my footing in Chicago's competitive marketing industry, eventually landing a position as a marketing executive for a growing tech company. James pursued his passion for architectural design, joining a firm known for innovative urban projects. We bought a small but charming condo near Lincoln Park and built a life rich with friends, cultural experiences, and professional growth. My relationship with my family settled into a predictable pattern. Obligatory phone calls every few weeks, mainly with my father, who would pass the phone to my mother for a brief surface-level catch-up. Visits home for major holidays where I would steel myself for the inevitable comparisons and slights. Jessica, meanwhile, had completed her master's degree and found a position at a Boston consulting firm, continuing to live within the safe orbit of my parents' constant approval. "Your sister just got another promotion," my mother would inform me during our calls. "Her boss says she is on the fast track to senior management. Are you still at that same company?" I had learned to let these comments roll off me, no longer seeking the validation I now knew would never come. Instead, I found validation in my own achievements and in the relationships I had built with people who genuinely saw and appreciated me. James proposed on a crisp fall evening by Lake Michigan. We had gone for a walk after dinner, the Chicago skyline glittering across the water. He stopped at a bench where we had sat on our first visit to the lake, took both my hands in his, and looked at me with those kind eyes that had first drawn me in. "Marissa," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness I could feel in his hands, "you are the strongest, most genuine person I have ever known. The way you have built yourself despite everything amazes me every day. I want to spend my life with you, supporting each other, challenging each other, loving each other through whatever comes. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple and elegant, exactly what I would have chosen. As I said yes, I felt a sense of rightness, of having found my true home in this relationship built on mutual respect and authentic love. The initial excitement of wedding planning was soon tempered by anxiety about my family's involvement. I called my parents to share the news, rehearsing in my mind how to handle their likely lukewarm response. "That is wonderful, honey," my mother said, sounding genuinely pleased for perhaps the first time I could remember. My heart lifted momentarily before she continued. "Jessica will make such a beautiful maid of honor." I had not even considered asking Jessica to be my maid of honor. We had a cordial but distant relationship, calling on birthdays and occasionally texting about family matters. Tara, who had remained my closest friend since college, had always been my obvious choice. "Actually, Mom, I was planning to ask Tara. Jessica and I are not really that close." A cold silence followed. "I see," my mother finally said. "Well, Jessica will be very hurt. You know how sensitive she is." This set the tone for the entire wedding planning process. Every decision became a potential landmine, every choice scrutinized for how it might affect Jessica's feelings. We chose a date in June, carefully confirming with my parents multiple times that it worked for their schedule. We selected a beautiful venue in Chicago, a converted historic building with exposed brick and dramatic windows. As the months of planning progressed, Jessica's demands and drama escalated. She complained about the burgundy bridesmaid dresses, claiming the color washed her out. She insisted on bringing her new boyfriend despite our plans for a relatively small wedding. She demanded to give a toast despite her history of making family events about herself. At each turn, my parents backed her, pressuring me to accommodate her wishes. "It would mean so much to your sister. became their constant refrain, as if my wedding day was primarily about ensuring Jessica's comfort and prominence. During a visit to the venue with my mother, she spent the entire time suggesting changes to accommodate Jessica's preferences. The ceremony spot I had chosen had too much sun, and you know how easily Jessica burns. The dinner seating arrangement would need to ensure Jessica was at a prominent table. Perhaps we should consider a different menu, since Jessica had recently decided to try a new diet. That night, I called my grandmother Eleanor in tears. At 80, she remained my most steadfast supporter, the one person in my family who seemed to see me clearly. "My dear girl," she said, her voice warm across the miles. "This day is about you and James, the life you are building together. Your parents and sister are caught in patterns they cannot seem to break. That is their limitation, not yours." James, witnessing my distress, suggested we consider eloping. "We could go to Hawaii, just us, and say our vows with our toes in the sand," he offered. "No drama, no disappointment." The offer was tempting, but something in me refused to give up my vision for our wedding just to accommodate my family's dysfunction. "This is our day," I said firmly. "I am not going to let them take that away too." The bridal shower organized by Tara and my Chicago friends should have been a joyful respite. Instead, my mother spent the entire event talking about Jessica's recent promotion and how stressful it must be for her to have so much responsibility at such a young age. Several of my friends exchanged confused glances while Tara did her best to redirect the conversation back to wedding preparations. As the wedding date approached, my parents became increasingly evasive about details like the rehearsal dinner. My father, who had initially offered to handle the arrangements, now seemed reluctant to commit to specifics. Each time I called, he had another excuse for why they had not yet confirmed the restaurant or sent out invitations to the wedding party. "We will figure it out, Marissa," he said vaguely. "There has been a lot going on with Jessica's work situation." A knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach, a familiar sensation from childhood, when I sensed I was once again being pushed aside for my sister's needs. Still, I never imagined what would happen next. 1 week before my wedding day, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered with a list of last-minute details ready to discuss, excited despite everything to be just days away from marrying the love of my life. "Marissa, we need to talk about something," my mother began, her tone immediately setting off alarm bells. "There has been a development with Jessica's work situation." I sat down, already knowing somehow that whatever came next would hurt. "What kind of development?" "She has a very important lunch meeting that Saturday with potential employers. A real career opportunity. It could mean a significant step up for her." The words hung in the air as I tried to process their implication. "Saturday, as in my wedding day Saturday." "Yes, that Saturday," my mother confirmed. "And the thing is, she really needs our support. Your father and I have been talking, and we think we need to be there for her for this lunch." The room seemed to tilt around me. "Are you saying you are not coming to my wedding?" A beat of silence. "Now, Marissa, do not be dramatic. We are just saying we might not make it to the ceremony. We could try to stop by the reception afterward, depending on how things go with Jessica's lunch." I felt like I could not breathe. After all the times they had confirmed the date with them, after all the planning and preparation, they were choosing Jessica's lunch over my wedding ceremony. "This is my wedding day," I said, my voice breaking. "The most important day of my life. How can you even consider missing it for a lunch?" My mother's voice took on the patient tone she had always used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "This is a very important opportunity for your sister. She is very nervous about it and needs our moral support. You have always been so independent, Marissa. You will be fine." Tears were streaming down my face now. "Mom, please, do not do this. Dad can go with Jessica if she really needs someone. Or you go, and Dad can come to my wedding. There has to be a compromise here." "Your sister needs both of us there," my mother said firmly. "You know how she gets in high-pressure situations. Besides, she specifically asked for us both to be there." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence until anger propelled me to call Jessica directly. My sister answered on the first ring as if she had been expecting my call. "How could you schedule something on my wedding day?" I demanded. "You have known the date for over a year." "It was not my choice," she replied, though something in her voice suggested otherwise. "This is how business works, Marissa. Important people do not schedule meetings around their siblings' personal events. So ask them to reschedule or go alone. Why do you need Mom and Dad there?" A slight pause. "Well, the potential employers asked about my family support system. It will look good to have them there. Besides, it is just a wedding. You can always show them pictures." The casual dismissal of the most important day of my life felt like a slap. Jessica, be honest. Did you do this on purpose? God, you are so paranoid, she scoffed. Not everything is about you. I have an actual career to think about. When I hung up, I broke down completely. James found me curled up on our bed, sobbing uncontrollably. After I managed to explain what had happened, his face hardened with anger. That is absolutely unacceptable, he said, pacing our bedroom. How dare they do this to you, to us? After everything, this is where they draw the line. We spent that night discussing our options. We could cancel the wedding and reschedule, though that would mean losing deposits and disappointing the guests who had already arranged travel. We could change the time of the ceremony, trying to accommodate my parents' betrayal. Or we could proceed as planned, accepting that my parents had made their choice, and it was not me. The next morning, I called my grandmother Eleanor, who was as outraged as James had been. This is the final straw, my dear, she said. Your parents have shown you exactly where you stand, and while that is heartbreaking, it is also clarifying. Have your beautiful wedding. I will be there to support you, even if they will not. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of anxiety attacks and sleepless nights. Friends rallied around me, expressing outrage on my behalf. James's parents called to assure me that they considered me a daughter already and would be there to support both of us on our special day. The day before the wedding, I made one final call to my parents, hoping against hope that they had reconsidered. We are really sorry about this, Marissa, my father said, sounding genuinely regretful, but not enough to change his mind. We will try to make it to at least part of the reception. That evening, scrolling through social media to distract myself, I saw Jessica had posted about her weekend plans. The important lunch meeting with potential employers was tagged as Lunch with the Girls at an upscale Boston restaurant. Several friends were tagged, but there was no mention of any professional contacts. It was just a social lunch deliberately scheduled to conflict with my wedding. I showed the post to James, who shook his head in disgust. I am so sorry, Marissa. You deserve so much better than this. For the first time that week, I did not cry. Instead, I felt a strange calm descend. Yes, I agreed. I do deserve better. And tomorrow I am going to marry you, surrounded by people who truly love and support us. That is what matters. The morning of my wedding day arrived with a perfect June sky sunlight streaming through the windows of the hotel suite, where my bridesmaids and I were getting ready. Despite the joy of the occasion, there was an undeniable undercurrent of sadness as I prepared to walk down the aisle without my parents. Tara, ever my fierce protector, had taken charge of keeping spirits high. She orchestrated a champagne toast as my hair and makeup were being finished, raising her glass with determined cheerfulness. To Marissa and James, she declared, two of the most genuine, loving people I know. Today is about celebrating your commitment to each other, surrounded by the family you have chosen. And sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the one we are born into. The other bridesmaids, all friends who had supported me through various life chapters, echoed the toast with enthusiastic agreement. Their presence felt like a protective circle of love, filling some of the void left by my parents' absence. My grandmother Eleanor arrived early, elegant in a blue dress she had carefully selected for the occasion. When we had a moment alone, she took my hands in her weathered ones and looked at me with eyes that held a lifetime of wisdom. My beautiful Marissa, she said softly, I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you have become. You have built a life based on authenticity and real love, despite not always receiving those things yourself. That takes remarkable strength. James's parents had also arrived early at the venue, his mother immediately embracing me with the warm, enveloping hug of someone who genuinely cared. We are so happy you are joining our family officially, she said, though you have been our daughter in our hearts for years already. As the ceremony time approached, I asked for a few moments alone. In the small anteroom of the venue, I stood in my wedding dress, confronting the grief and anger that still lingered beneath my happiness. I allowed myself to acknowledge the pain of my parents' choice, to feel it fully rather than pushing it aside. And then consciously, I made the decision to not let their absence define this day. The wedding coordinator gently knocked, indicating it was time. The original plan had been for my father to walk me down the aisle. Now I would make that walk alone a fitting symbol of the independence I had cultivated out of necessity. As the doors opened and the music began, I took my first steps into the ceremony space. The guests rose, faces full of love and support, turning toward me. Halfway down the aisle, I spotted my grandmother standing at the front row exactly where my parents should have been. She gave me a small nod of encouragement, and I felt my heart swell with gratitude for her unwavering support. James waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving mine as I approached. The look on his face, a mixture of awe and profound love, reminded me of what this day was truly about. Not family politics or old wounds, but the future we were choosing to build together. Our vows, which we had written ourselves, took on additional resonance in light of recent events. I promise to be your steadfast supporter, to celebrate your victories and comfort you in disappointment, James said, to choose you again and again every single day. My voice trembled slightly as I responded. I promise to build with you a home based on respect, honesty, and unconditional acceptance, to create with you the kind of loving partnership I have always believed possible. The reception that followed was beautiful in its authenticity. Friends gave heartfelt speeches that celebrated not just our love story, but the resilience I had shown in creating a life of meaning and joy. Marissa has taught me what real strength looks like, Tara said in her maid of honor speech. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet determination to remain true to yourself, even when it would be easier to compromise. During a quiet moment at the reception, I checked my phone and saw Jessica had posted more photos of her important business lunch. The images showed a casual gathering of friends at a restaurant, cocktails in hand, clearly nothing professional. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to prioritize what really matters." Saturday vibes had girls' lunch. The blatant lie should have hurt, but instead it felt like final confirmation that I had made the right decision in proceeding with the wedding as planned. During our first dance, as James held me close, I whispered to him, "I deserve better than this, do not I?" He pulled back slightly to look into my eyes. "You absolutely do. And you are claiming that for yourself today. That is what makes you so incredible." Late in the reception, my father called. I stepped outside to take it, curious what excuse they would offer. "The ceremony must be over by now," he said awkwardly. "How did it go?" "It was beautiful," I replied honestly. "Everything we wanted it to be." "Your mother and I are very sorry we could not be there," he said, the hollow apology falling flat. "Jessica's thing went longer than expected, and now your mother is not feeling well." I did not bother to confront him with the truth about Jessica's professional lunch that I had seen on social media. What would be the point? Instead, I simply said, "I hope Mom feels better soon. I should get back to my guests now." As I returned to the reception, my grandmother intercepted me. "Was that your father?" When I nodded, she shook her head sadly. "Some people cannot see the treasure right in front of them, Marissa. That is their loss, not yours." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of dancing laughter and genuine celebration. Despite the painful absence of my parents, or perhaps because of the freedom that came with accepting their limitations, it was truly a joyful event. James and I departed amid a shower of rose petals, heading off to our honeymoon, with a sense of having crossed an important threshold together. As we drove away, I rested my head on my new husband's shoulder, feeling both the lingering sadness of my family's betrayal and the triumph of having created a beautiful wedding day despite it. "It really was perfect, was it not?" I asked. "It was," James agreed, "because it was authentic, just like you." Our honeymoon in Hawaii provided a much-needed escape from the emotional turbulence of the wedding and the months leading up to it. For 2 weeks, we swam in crystal-clear waters, hiked to breathtaking waterfalls, and fell asleep to the sound of waves breaking on the shore. Away from the daily reminders of family drama, I found space to process my feelings about my parents' absence on our wedding day. I keep cycling between sadness and anger. I admitted to James one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset. Part of me still cannot believe they actually went through with it, that they really chose Jessica's fake business lunch over my wedding. James took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. "Your feelings are completely valid. What they did was hurtful beyond words. Take all the time you need to work through it." By the time we returned to Chicago, I had reached a kind of provisional peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance of the reality of my family dynamics and a determination not to let them continue to wound me as they had in the past. That resolve was immediately tested by the barrage of messages waiting for us. My parents had called multiple times and left voicemails that danced around their absence, focusing instead on hoping we had a nice wedding and asking about the honeymoon. Jessica had sent a wedding gift, an impersonal crystal vase with a note that read, "Congrats on your big day. Sorry if there were any scheduling conflicts. Sometimes adult life gets complicated. The casual dismissal of their deliberate choice to miss my wedding was infuriating. James found me staring at the note hands, shaking with anger. She is still pretending it was a real work event, I said incredulously, even though she posted photos of her girls' lunch all over social media. A week after our return, my mother called to invite us to dinner at their home the next time we visited Boston. Her tone was light, as if nothing significant had happened, as if missing their daughter's wedding was a minor scheduling issue rather than a profound statement of priorities. "We would love to hear all about the honeymoon," she said cheerfully. "And see your wedding photos, of course." I agreed to the dinner, surprising myself. James raised his eyebrows when I told him. "Are you sure you do not owe them immediate forgiveness?" he reminded me. "I am not going for forgiveness," I explained. "I am going because I need to say some things face to face, things I should have said years ago." James nodded, understanding immediately. "Do you want me there with you?" "Always," I replied. "You are my family now, my real family." We flew to Boston the following month, staying at a hotel rather than at my parents' house, as we would have in the past. This small act of boundary setting felt significant, a declaration that things had changed. The dinner started predictably enough. My mother had prepared my father's favorite roast, not bothering to ask what James or I might prefer. Jessica arrived late, making a dramatic entrance, and immediately launching into a story about her stressful week at work. My parents listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions and making sympathetic noises. When the conversation finally turned to our wedding, my mother's approach was breathtakingly dismissive. "The centerpieces looked lovely in the photos," she commented, as if discussing a distant acquaintance's event she had seen on social media, not her own daughter's wedding she had chosen to skip. "It really is too bad about that important lunch," my father added awkwardly. "Bad timing all around." Jessica nodded in agreement. "Sometimes these things cannot be helped. My career is at a really critical juncture right now." My mother patted Jessica's hand sympathetically, before turning to me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "It was just one day, Marissa. You need to move on. Holding grudges is so unattractive." Something inside me, some dam that had been holding back decades of hurt and anger, finally broke. I placed my fork down carefully, took a steadying breath, and stood up. "It was not just one day," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "It was my wedding day. The day I committed my life to the person I love most in this world. The day most parents would move heaven and earth to be present for their child." The table fell silent. My father looked down at his plate. My mother's smile froze in place. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. "But it was not really about that one day, was it?" I continued. "It was about a lifetime of choices that made it clear where I stand in this family. It was about the birthday parties that got canceled when Jessica had a cold. It was about celebrating her B grades while barely acknowledging my academic achievements. It was about family photos where I was always on the edge, almost out of frame." My mother started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "No, I am going to finish. For years, I tried to earn your love and attention. I achieved and accomplished and did everything right, thinking eventually it would be enough. But I finally understand that the problem was never with me. It was with you and your inexplicable need to elevate one child at the expense of the other." Jessica pushed back from the table aggressively. "Oh my God, here we go with the jealousy again. Just because mom and dad recognize my special talents and needs does not mean they love you any less. Not everything is a competition, Marissa." Her outburst only confirmed everything I was saying. The golden child, so accustomed to being centered and prioritized, simply could not tolerate attention being directed elsewhere, even in a conversation about how that very dynamic had caused harm. "This is not about jealousy, Jessica," I replied steadily. "This is about basic respect and decency, about parents who should love both their children equally but clearly do not, about a sister who deliberately scheduled a fake business lunch on my wedding day because she could not stand not being the center of attention for one day of my life." Jessica's face flushed with anger. "That lunch was important. You have no idea what my career demands." "We all saw the photos you posted, Jessica. It was just drinks with friends. You lied, and mom and dad chose to believe that lie because it gave them an excuse to prioritize you again." My father had not spoken, his discomfort evident in his hunched posture and refusal to make eye contact. My mother, however, had begun to cry tears that I recognized from childhood as her go-to strategy when confronted with unpleasant truths. "How can you say such hurtful things?" she sobbed. "After everything we have done for you, we gave you everything." "No, Mom, you gave Jessica everything. You gave me what was left over when you remembered I existed at all, and I am done pretending that was enough. I am done begging for scraps of affection. I am done making myself smaller to accommodate this family's dysfunction." I reached for James's hand, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I am not cutting you out of my life, but things will be different going forward. I will not chase your approval anymore. I will not rearrange my life to accommodate Jessica's whims. I will not pretend it is normal or acceptable for parents to miss their daughter's wedding for a non-emergency." With that, I gathered my purse and coat. James stood beside me, his hand at the small of my back in a gesture of solidarity. "We are leaving now. When you are ready to acknowledge the harm you have caused and work toward a healthier relationship, I will be open to that conversation. Until then, I will be protecting myself from further disappointment." As we walked out to our rental car, the cool evening air felt cleansing against my flushed skin. My hands were shaking, but not with anxiety or hurt. Rather, they trembled with the force of finally speaking my truth after decades of silence. "I am so proud of you," James said as we drove away. "That took incredible courage." The week that followed was emotionally exhausting. I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist to process the confrontation and its aftermath. Jessica sent a barrage of angry text messages, each one further confirming the entitlement and self-centeredness I had finally named out loud. "You have always been jealous of me," one text read. "Now you are trying to turn Mom and Dad against me with your drama. Real mature." My mother took a different approach, posting passive-aggressive quotes on social media about ungrateful children and the pain of motherhood. Several relatives called, having heard versions of the dinner confrontation that painted me as the villain who had cruelly attacked my innocent family. Most surprisingly, my father called 5 days after the dinner. When I answered, expecting more gaslighting or manipulation, he instead spoke with a hesitant vulnerability I had rarely heard from him. "I have been thinking about what you said," he began. "And while I do not agree with everything, I can see that your mother and I may have shown favoritism over the years. That was never our intention." It was not a full acknowledgement, but it was more self-reflection than I had ever heard from either of my parents. "Intentions matter less than impact, Dad," I replied. "And the impact has been painful." "I understand that now," he said quietly. "I am sorry we missed your wedding. That was wrong of us." The simple apology, so long overdue, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It was not enough to erase decades of hurt, but it was a start, a tiny crack in the facade of denial that had characterized my family for so long. 6 months after the wedding, the landscape of my family relationships had shifted significantly. The confrontation at that dinner had set in motion changes I could not have anticipated, some painful, others surprisingly hopeful. My relationship with my parents now existed on my terms, not theirs. I called when I felt like talking, not out of obligation or hope for approval. I set clear boundaries about what topics were open for discussion and which patterns of interaction I would no longer tolerate. Gone were the days of silently absorbing subtle jabs or comparisons to Jessica. If such comments arose, I named them directly or ended the conversation. Perhaps the most surprising development had been my father's response. 2 months after our phone conversation, he had begun seeing a therapist of his own, something I never imagined possible for a man of his generation and stoic temperament. "I do not want to be estranged from you," he had explained during a rare one-on-one lunch when I was in Boston for a work conference. "I am trying to understand how things went so wrong and how I can do better." His efforts felt genuine, if sometimes awkward and halting. He would call just to check in about my work or to share articles he thought might interest me. Small gestures, but meaningful in their intention to see me as an individual, not merely as a counterpoint to Jessica. My mother had been less receptive to change. She still slipped easily into old patterns, centering conversations on Jessica's achievements or making subtle comparisons. But even she seemed more aware of these tendencies, occasionally catching and correcting herself mid-sentence. "Jessica just got a promotion and, well, how are things at your company? Any interesting projects?" These small course corrections suggested that while she might never fully acknowledge the favoritism that had shaped our family, she was at least peripherally aware of its existence and making minimal efforts to address it. Jessica herself remained entrenched in her role as the entitled golden child. My standing up to the family dynamic had threatened her position, and she had responded with hostility and increased demands for attention. She referred to my confrontation as my bridezilla meltdown and suggested to relatives that I was struggling with mental health issues. Her reaction, while hurtful, was ultimately clarifying. It confirmed that her identity was so intertwined with her special status in the family that she could not conceive of a balanced relationship between us. I maintained minimal contact with her, responding to group messages, but rarely engaging one-on-one. Through it all, my grandmother Eleanor remained my most steadfast family supporter. At 80, she had become even more direct in her observations about family dynamics, no longer feeling the need to be diplomatic. "Your mother simply cannot see past the end of her nose on this matter," she told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "But you standing in your truth has made a difference, even if they cannot admit it yet." James's family continued to be a source of profound support and love. His parents treated me with the kind of unconditional acceptance I had always craved from my own, celebrating my professional accomplishments and genuinely enjoying my company. Holidays spent with them felt relaxing rather than fraught with tension, a revelation about how family gatherings could and should feel. My friendships had deepened as well. The friends who had stood by me through the wedding drama had shown themselves to be true family of choice. Tara especially remained a fierce advocate and confidant, regularly checking in on my emotional well-being and celebrating each small step toward healthier boundaries. Therapy had become an essential tool in my healing process. Working with a therapist specializing in family dynamics had helped me understand the roots of my people-pleasing tendencies, my excessive need for validation, and my difficulty trusting that I was worthy of love. Each session helped me dismantle these patterns and build healthier ones in their place. When we discovered I was pregnant 4 months after the wedding, the news brought both joy and anxiety. How would parenthood change my already complicated family relationships? Would my parents repeat their patterns of favoritism with their grandchildren? How could I ensure I did not unconsciously replicate harmful dynamics in my own parenting? James and I had long conversations about how to involve my family in our child's life while maintaining appropriate boundaries. We decided on limited supervised visits, clear expectations about behavior, and a zero-tolerance policy for comparing our child to any cousins that might come along. "This is where the cycle ends," I told James one night, as we lay in bed, his hand resting gently on my growing belly. "Our child will never wonder if they are loved or worthy. They will never feel like they have to earn our attention or approval." My career continued to flourish, partly because I had stopped seeking external validation and learned to trust my own judgment. The confidence that came from standing in my truth had translated into professional assertiveness that had earned me respect and recognition at work. Most profoundly, I had come to a deeper understanding of my parents' limitations. Their behavior was not a reflection of my worth, but of their own unresolved issues and narrow perspectives. This realization had not erased the hurt they had caused, but it had allowed me to see them with compassion rather than expectation. "Some people can only give what they themselves received," my therapist had observed. "Your parents may be operating from a deficit they do not even recognize." This insight had helped me release the last vestiges of hope that they would suddenly transform into the fully present, equally loving parents I had longed for as a child. Instead, I could accept the relationship we actually had, appreciate its positive aspects, and supplement it with the rich connections I had built elsewhere. The peaceful acceptance of this truth had been the most liberating outcome of the entire wedding saga. No longer waiting for parental approval had freed me to fully embrace the love and belonging I had created for myself. "You know what I've realized?" I said to James one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the Chicago sunset. "For years, I thought the opposite of rejection was acceptance. But it's not. The opposite of rejection is belonging. And I've found that with you, with our friends, with the family we're creating." James squeezed my hand, his eyes reflecting the same certainty I felt. "And our child will never doubt where they belong." As I looked out over the city that had become my true home, I felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The pain of my parents skipping my wedding had been a catalyst for growth and change that might otherwise have taken decades. In forcing me to confront the reality of my family dynamics, it had ultimately set me free. What is your family story? Have you ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members or stand up for yourself against unfair treatment? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to demand the respect you deserve. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and clarity on your own journey to healing.